Imagine this. Your dad invites you to his fancy birthday party, then asks you to pay the $5,320 bill. What would you do? Well, I've been in that exact situation. No one talked to me about it beforehand. They just assumed I'd cover the cost simply because I'm their daughter. To them, I was nothing more than an emotionless ATM. But then my grandfather stepped in, the one person who's always stood for what's right and fair. So, how did he set things straight with my parents and sister? Stay with me. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened after that party. Hello, everyone. I'm Amelia. I'm 28 years old, living in San Jose and working for a major tech corporation. My life right now is pretty peaceful. During the day, I'm deep into tech projects, solving complex problems I genuinely enjoy. In the evenings, I usually hang out with friends at small local restaurants, or I cook a simple dinner for myself. Being single has its quiet moments, and I've come to appreciate them. Every weekend, if work isn't too demanding, I visit the most important person in my life, my grandfather, William. He lives about 40 minutes from me. Even at 75, he insists on living independently and refuses to rely on anyone. His small house is always spotless, every detail reflecting the military discipline he maintained for years. You'll know exactly what I mean if you've ever met a former soldier. His words and actions are always firm, never vague, never evasive. But what I admire most about him isn't his strictness. It's his unwavering sense of fairness. He never plays favorites with anyone in the family. 2 years ago, when my family treated me in the worst way imaginable, my grandfather stood up. He brought justice back into my life in a way no one saw coming. After that, our family completely fell apart. And since then, he's never shown even a hint of regret. My story begins on a weekend in May 2023, when my dad Jacob was throwing his 55th birthday party. Looking back, deciding to attend that party was probably one of the worst decisions I've ever made. A week before his birthday, I got an invitation from him. Honestly, the long-standing tension in our family made me reluctant to go. The unresolved conflicts had been simmering for years, and every visit home felt more like a challenge than a reunion. But in the end, I decided to show up. The reason was simple. I didn't want my absence to force my parents into awkward conversations with extended family. I could already hear the questions. Where's Amelia? Why didn't she come? I knew exactly how that would put them on the spot. At the time, agreeing to attend felt like the right thing to do, but I was genuinely caught off guard when I got the message about the party venue. The Green Fork, a high-end garden restaurant known for its elegant events and steep prices. Knowing how frugal my parents usually are, choosing a place like that was entirely out of character. I wondered why they'd pick such a fancy location for a second. Then I thought maybe they had been saving up for a special occasion like this or decided to dip into their savings to make it a memorable night. That afternoon, I arrived at the restaurant early, around 5 o'clock. The moment I stepped into the event space, I was honestly stunned. The scale of the party was way beyond anything I had imagined. Around 60 guests, including relatives, friends, and neighbors. This wasn't just a typical birthday celebration. A few family members had already shown up. When I spotted Uncle Mike, my dad's younger brother, and Aunt Morgan, his older sister, my heart warmed. I immediately walked over to greet them with genuine affection. Uncle Mike and Aunt Morgan are two people I genuinely love and respect in our family. They inherited that same sense of fairness from my grandfather. They've never shown favoritism and always stood firmly on the side of what's right. During some of my most challenging times, I always felt seen and understood by them. After a few minutes of catching up, I went to where my parents and my sister Olivia were standing. I pulled out a bottle of expensive whiskey, my dad's favorite, worth about $300. When I handed it to him, he looked pleased and thankful, but something felt off. A strange unease crept in as I looked at the smiles on my dad's, mom's, and Olivia's faces. Those smiles seemed too controlled, like they were hiding something. I can't quite explain it, but my gut told me something would happen that night. What I didn't know was that this would be the last party I'd ever attend as a member of that family. The party officially began around 6 p.m. as the last guests walked into the restaurant. The room buzzed with laughter, greetings, and cheerful birthday wishes for my dad. However, there was one noticeable absence. As I scanned the tables, I realized my grandfather wasn't there. Feeling a bit concerned, I pulled out my phone and called him. After just a few rings, his familiar voice came through on the other end. He said, I'm getting old, kid. Big parties aren't my thing, so I'm not coming." Hearing those words, I understood he didn't want to be part of a crowded gathering. At 73, he preferred peace over noisy celebrations. A few seconds later, he requested, "If the party ends early, stop by and see me, all right? I miss you. You haven't visited in 2 weeks." Hearing that warmed my heart. I'd been so tied up with work lately, I hadn't made time for him. Without hesitation, I promised, "I'll come to see you after the party, Grandpa." When the call ended, I returned to the lively atmosphere around me. Right then, the formal part of the party began. That familiar tune, "Happy Birthday," filled the room, giving it a cozy feel. My dad stood before a large birthday cake, grinning from ear to ear. The room erupted in applause as he blew out the candles and cut the cake. Soon after, the food started arriving at each table, and when I saw the menu, I was stunned. Grilled lobster with garlic butter, Wagyu steak, high-end red wine. Everything on the list screamed expensive. My brain immediately started doing the math, and the number startled me. This party had to be costing my parents well over $5,000. Looking around, I had never seen my dad this happy. He floated from table to table, clinking glasses with each guest, cracking jokes, and soaking in all the birthday wishes. His smile never once faded. My mom and sister Olivia looked radiant, smiling as they accepted compliments about the lavish party. But in the middle of all that joy, something started to feel off. Now and then, when I wasn't paying attention, I caught glances from my dad, mom, and Olivia, and those looks weren't filled with affection or warmth. They had something else behind them, something I couldn't quite explain, like they were calculating something about me. Each time I noticed their stares, an uneasy feeling crept deeper into me. My heart beat faster, and a vague anxiety began to settle in. Something wasn't right. And my instincts turned out to be right. Around 7:30 p.m., just as the party had reached its peak and everyone was full and cheerful, I noticed Olivia slowly rising from her seat. My sister walked deliberately, heading straight toward the cashier counter in the restaurant's corner. At the time, I was still chatting with some relatives, trying to enjoy the lively atmosphere, but something about the way Olivia moved caught my attention. I couldn't look away. About 5 minutes later, I saw her return, holding what looked like the bill. But instead of returning to her seat, she walked directly to the main table where my parents were sitting. The three of them immediately huddled together, heads bent over the receipt. From where I sat, I could see their exchange growing tense. My dad shook his head, my mom furrowed her brows, and Olivia kept pointing at different numbers on the paper. What made me feel most uneasy was how they glanced in my direction occasionally, then turned back to their conversation. Judging by the worried looks on their faces, I figured the cost of the party must have gone way over their original budget, and now they were trying to figure out how to deal with the bill. Deep down, I started mentally preparing myself. They might ask me to chip in. About 2 minutes after their discussion, the three stood up and walked toward me, just as I had expected. Their faces were noticeably more serious than before. My dad led the way, approached me, and said quietly, "Amelia, come outside for a minute." At his request, I stood up and followed them. The situation was clear. They were short on money to cover the party and needed my help. I had already prepared myself to support them through what I assumed was a tough financial moment. We moved to a relatively private area, somewhere no guests could see or overhear us. Once we arrived, Olivia handed me the bill without saying a word. I glanced at the numbers printed on the paper, $5,320, just as I had estimated for a party this extravagant. The amount didn't surprise me, but it was steep for a family gathering. Not wanting to make things awkward, I quickly reached into my jacket pocket for my wallet. I pulled out a stack of cash, counted out $1,000, and handed it to them with a warm smile and a friendly tone. "I'll chip in $1,000 for the party." I genuinely thought that would make them feel relieved and grateful. I believed that offering a significant portion would help ease whatever financial pressure they were under. But their reaction completely blindsided me. Olivia was the first to speak. She looked me dead in the eye and snapped, "Only 1,000? You're supposed to cover the whole thing." Her words hit me like a thunderclap. A chill ran straight down my spine. Before I could even react, my dad, his voice slightly slurred from the alcohol, jumped in. He said, "That's right. You need to pay the whole bill. You're the only one here who can afford it." My head spun as I processed the harsh reality behind their words. No one had asked for my input before planning this party. No one had talked to me about the venue, the size, or the cost. They had chosen an expensive restaurant, invited 60 guests, and now expected me to foot the entire bill, as if that were somehow my natural obligation. After a few seconds of silence, trying to process everything and stay composed, I looked at them and responded firmly. I can only contribute 1,000. Once I finished speaking, Olivia cut in again, this time with an unmistakably accusatory tone. You make 6 figures a year and you'll be stingy with mom and dad over this? Her words hit me in the throat. I couldn't believe she was turning something as personal as family into a cold financial transaction. Then my mom joined in, adding to the attack with a tone full of disappointment. This is your father's 55th birthday, a special occasion. Do you want people to mock our family and say we can't afford to host a proper party? At that moment, whatever patience I had left completely drained away. I felt deeply betrayed. I looked straight at them and replied bluntly, no one can force me to pay for a party that no one talked to me about beforehand. Once I said that, Olivia looked like she was about to fire back, but my dad raised his hand to silence her. He stared at me with a look of anger and resentment, then spoke in a cold, cutting voice. I raised you from nothing. I sacrificed everything for you, and now you can't even spare a few thousand for me. No child is more ungrateful than you. Those cruel words sent the tension over the edge. In that moment, I felt something inside me break. I turned to look at my mom, then at Olivia, hoping, just hoping, for a sliver of support or understanding. But neither of them said a word. They just stood there silent. No one spoke up for me. No one showed even the slightest bit of empathy. What unfolded before me made one thing painfully clear. I was utterly alone in my family. Not wanting to give them more room to accuse or guilt-trip me, I looked my father in the eye and said with resolve, all right, if that's how you want it, I'll cover the cost this time, but I'm asking for fairness. Olivia will be responsible for half of the bill. No sooner had I finished than Olivia snapped back, her tone sharp and accusatory. I'm your sister. I'm your family. Can't you make a sacrifice for your own family? Her words felt like a blade straight through the heart. In that moment, I knew I had lost something precious, something I'd never get back. Then my mom spoke up again, rushing to Olivia's defense. Olivia just started working. She doesn't have that kind of money. Their reactions were bitterly ironic. I looked at them and replied calmly, I'm simply following the logic Dad just laid out. You, Olivia, and I are the only 2 people in this family, so the cost should be split equally between us. Faced with my firm stance and a logic they couldn't deny, my father finally lost all composure. His face turned red with anger, and he growled at me, spitting out each word, You're paying the entire bill, period. I stared at him and asked directly, What if I refuse? Without a second's hesitation, he fired back, Then you're no longer my daughter. The shock hit me so hard I could barely breathe. Even in my worst nightmares, I never imagined the man who once held me when I cried, who used to carry me on his back when I was little, could say something that cruel. I didn't want to drag out this pointless argument any longer. I didn't want to disturb the guests still laughing and celebrating outside. So I answered coldly, If that's your decision, then fine. I agree. Without another word, I slid the $1,000 back into my wallet, turned around, and walked toward my seat. I grabbed my coat, ready to leave this place and never return. As I walked past the 3 people who once were my family, I paused for a moment, looked at them one last time, and said, Remember exactly what you did to me today. And just like that, the bond between us was severed. Right there, in the middle of a birthday party that was supposed to be a happy family moment. After leaving the party, I walked to the parking lot with a heavy heart. I got into the driver's seat, started the car, and followed the familiar road to my grandfather's house, keeping the promise I'd made to him earlier that evening. For the next 30 minutes on the road, my mind couldn't rest. What had just happened at the restaurant felt like a door swinging open to the past, flooding me with memories of the favoritism I had endured growing up. They came rushing back like a tidal wave. I remembered when I was 10 and Olivia was 8. My parents spent hundreds of dollars on piano lessons for her with a well-known instructor and proudly showed off her musical talent to the neighbors. That summer, I asked my parents for just $50 to buy a used guitar and teach myself. They flat out refused. Their reasoning, guitar isn't suitable for kids, and it's an unnecessary expense. By the time I was 12, the difference in how we were treated had become even clearer. My birthdays were simple, just a homemade cake from Mom and 2 or 3 close friends from school. No decorations, no real presents. But Olivia, starting from her 10th birthday, every year was a full-blown event. My parents would rent venues, invite relatives, neighbors, and their entire circle of friends. Her guest list always had over 10 kids, and the gifts were lavish. One time, I couldn't take it anymore, and finally asked my parents why they treated us so differently. I still remember their answer, word for word. Olivia's a girl. You need to learn to love and protect your sister. That was just one example. There were countless other moments, school choices, extracurriculars, even everyday spending, all marked by blatant favoritism. Through all of it, in those quiet, isolating moments where I felt like a stranger in my own family, there was only one person who truly listened with an open heart. My grandfather. He never judged me, never told me to accept the unfairness. Instead, he quietly made up for it with the love and care I never got from my parents. That's why I returned to his little house every weekend. That place became my refuge, where I felt understood and at peace. The familiar black iron gate of my grandfather's house came into view, pulling me out of my thoughts and grounding me back in the present. That tiny home glowing with warm yellow light from inside felt like a lighthouse in the middle of a storm, offering me a sense of safety after the emotional wreckage I had just come through. As I pulled up to the gate, the porch light flicked on, and I saw the familiar silhouette of my grandfather standing at the door. He opened it before I even had a chance to turn off the engine. I figured he'd been waiting for me, and the moment he heard my car approaching, he knew I was home. Walking into his cozy house, filled with the familiar scent of pipe tobacco and aged wood, I tried to control my expression. I didn't want him to worry, especially this evening, but no matter how hard I tried, what had just happened was written all over my face. With his sharp eyes and years of life experience, he picked up on it instantly. He looked at me with quiet concern and gently asked a few soft, caring, and sincere questions. He encouraged me to speak up if something was bothering me. At first, I tried to brush it off and said everything was fine. But my grandfather, with all his years in the military and raising a family, wasn't so easily fooled. He continued to ask patiently with the calmness of someone who had weathered 1,000 storms. After several gentle nudges and his unwavering presence, I couldn't hold it in. I began to tell him everything, every detail of what had happened at the birthday party. From the moment Olivia walked off to get the bill, to the tense confrontation, to the cruel words my father threw at me. He sat quietly through it all, occasionally nodding or frowning at the parts that hit the hardest. As I reached the part where my father threatened to disown me if I didn't pay the bill, I saw my grandfather's expression shift. His face hardened. When I finally finished, he was silent for a moment. Then, in a low, furious voice, he muttered, "Those bastards." It was the first time I had ever heard my grandfather, always composed, always measured, use such strong language. It told me how angry he truly was at how my family treated me. After that moment of raw emotion, he began to comfort me. He reassured me that I had made the right decision by refusing their unreasonable demand. He reminded me that real family is built on love and mutual respect, not financial exploitation. We talked until about 10 p.m. By then I felt lighter. His words, his calm strength had helped steady me. I stood to leave, hugged him, and promised to call more often. On the drive back to my house, the home I had bought with years of hard work and saving, I felt a strange sense of peace. Even though I was hurting from what I had lost, I knew I had made the right choice. That night, after opening my heart to my grandfather and hearing his words of wisdom, I didn't think about the party anymore. I fell asleep through the night, unaware that the storm wasn't over. The next morning, I walked into the office feeling relatively at ease after a good night's sleep. The rhythm of my daily work helped me temporarily push aside the events of the night before. Around 10:01 a.m., while I was focused on a significant project, the familiar ping of a new email echoed from my computer. I opened it and quickly scanned the message. Immediately, I recognized it. It was an email from the Green Fork requesting payment of $5,320 for my father's birthday party. They explained that my contact information had been provided as the person responsible for the bill. Reading that email, I felt a mix of anger and resignation. Obviously, my parents and Olivia had given the restaurant my details, hoping I'd feel pressured into paying. Without hesitating for even a second, I began drafting a reply. My response was polite but firm. I clearly stated that I was not the event organizer, had no involvement in the planning, and bore no financial responsibility for any member of my former family. Within 30 minutes, the restaurant sincerely apologized for the inconvenience. They explained they had received incorrect information and would contact the actual party organizer directly to resolve the billing issue. Seeing their apology, I felt a strange wave of relief. My grandfather had been right when he told me to stand up and protect myself. For the first time, I had said no to my family and stood my ground, and it felt incredible. Around 3 p.m., my phone suddenly rang. My dad's name flashed on the screen. My heart beat a little faster, but I had already decided. I didn't pick up. I tapped decline. Less than 2 minutes later, he called again. I declined. Then a third time. Still, I refused to answer. After the third rejected call, a new text notification appeared. I opened it and saw a short, blunt message filled with anger. "So, you've decided not to pay for my party, huh?" Reading that message, I felt an unexpected calm wash over me. I typed a short reply. "Who is this?" "Sorry, I don't recognize the number. Must be a wrong contact." Once I saw the read receipt under the message, I opened my contacts and did something I never thought I'd do. I blocked my dad's number. Then I blocked my mom's. And finally, Olivia's. With each block, I felt a little bit lighter, and I knew I had made the right decision. The following month passed in a strange kind of peace I had never experienced before. My life suddenly became much simpler. No more tense phone calls, no more unreasonable demands, no more feeling like I was being taken advantage of. I had no idea how my parents and Olivia ended up paying for that birthday party, and honestly, I didn't care anymore. From that day on, we became strangers, just people who happened to share some DNA. I thought I'd never see them again, and that life would quietly move forward like this. That was until one day my phone rang. Grandpa calling. When I heard his voice, I could tell he was about to make a special request. After a few warm, routine questions, he said, "I'm throwing a big party for my 73rd birthday this year. The venue is the Green Fork. The party starts at 6 p.m. You have to come." My stomach twisted. I knew that if I went to Grandpa's birthday, there was no avoiding it. I'd have to see my parents and Olivia again. After everything that had happened, the last thing I wanted was to face them in any setting. With a hesitant voice, I replied, "I'm sorry, Grandpa. I don't want to run into Dad and Olivia at the party. I don't want to make things uncomfortable for you." I hoped he'd understand. I hoped he'd let it go. But his reaction caught me completely off guard. His tone changed when he heard my refusal, firm and commanding, something I rarely heard from him. "You're coming. If you don't show up, don't call me Grandpa anymore." That sentence struck like a bolt of lightning. The one person I still considered real family, the only one who had ever stood by me, was threatening to cut me off if I didn't do as he asked. Left with no choice, I gave in. With a reluctant sigh, I replied, "I'll come." What I didn't know at that moment was that Grandpa had a plan, a very specific one, and at this birthday party, he would set things right in a way no one could have seen coming. In the following days, I thought carefully about the right gift for my grandfather. After 2 days of thorough searching, I decided on a classic-style luxury watch, elegant, dignified, and perfectly fitting, for a former military man like him. What made it truly special was the engraving I had custom-ordered on the back. It read, "Love You, Grandpa 2023, followed by my signature beneath it. I believe this gift wasn't just practical. It carried real emotional weight. It was a way to express my love and deep gratitude for the one person who had always stood by me. Holding the carefully wrapped box, I pictured his proud, contented smile when he opened it. On the day of Grandpa's birthday party, I found myself driving again to the Green Fork, the same restaurant where my father's birthday took place just a month earlier. As I caught sight of the familiar sign, a wave of unease crept in. I couldn't help but feel a bit anxious about what might happen. Stepping into that familiar space with its neatly arranged tables and warm lighting brought a rush of memories from the month before. The tense confrontation, the harsh words, the moment I walked away from my family. All of it came flooding back, stirring a sense of discomfort and restlessness inside me. But I quickly pulled myself together. Today was Grandpa's day, and I didn't want my negative emotions to overshadow his celebration. As I entered the main event area, I saw that many guests had already arrived. I immediately spotted my parents and Olivia sitting at a table near the window. They looked completely at ease, as if nothing unusual had happened over the past month. Uncle Mike and Aunt Morgan were also there, chatting cheerfully with other guests. When they saw me, they smiled warmly and waved. After greeting them, I walked straight over to Grandpa, seated in a sharp black suit at the main table. I pulled out the carefully wrapped gift box and handed it to him. He accepted it with curious eyes, opened it, and saw the classic timepiece inside. His face lit up when he turned it over and read the engraved words on the back. He looked at me with a warm smile and said, "This is such a meaningful gift. I love it. I'll treasure it." Seeing how happy and touched he was filled me with joy. Knowing that my gift mattered to him made every effort I'd put into finding and preparing it feel completely worth it. Meanwhile, my parents and Olivia continued to ignore me completely. From the moment I walked in, they hadn't glanced in my direction. No eye contact, no greetings, not even a passing acknowledgement of my presence. We treated each other like total strangers who just happened to be at the same event. By around 6 p.m., all the guests had arrived. I did a quick head count, nearly 50 people in attendance. That surprised me. Grandpa's birthdays had always been small, usually just immediate family, our household, Uncle Mike's, and Aunt Morgan's, never more than 15 people total. At the time, I assumed Grandpa wanted a more memorable celebration at age 73. Or maybe he just wanted to reconnect with some old friends. What I didn't realize was that Grandpa had a particular plan in place for this birthday. And this party was about to become unforgettable for reasons no one could have predicted. That evening, the party unfolded in a warm and joyful atmosphere, similar to my father's birthday a month earlier. Elegant dishes were served: grilled lobster, premium steak, and expensive bottles of wine. Guests chatted cheerfully, raised their glasses, and celebrated Grandpa's birthday, creating a cozy vibe. Around 8 p.m., after everyone had eaten their fill, Grandpa suddenly stood up and signaled to a server. In a clear and firm voice, he said, "Bring the check, please." The room quieted slightly as people turned to watch. When the server brought out the bill, Grandpa pointed directly at my father instead of taking it himself. Calm but commanding, he said to the server, "Hand it to him." Holding the bill in his hands, my dad looked confused and startled. He glanced over at Grandpa with uncertainty and asked, "What's this all about, Dad?" Grandpa just smiled, calm and measured, and replied gently, "You'll be covering tonight's party." My father was stunned. He stared down at the numbers on the bill, then looked at my mother for help, then at Olivia, silently pleading. After a few moments, once he had gathered himself, he turned back to Grandpa and asked, voice shaky, "Is this some mistake? You want me to pay the full $5,530?" Without missing a beat, Grandpa answered firmly, "That's right." The entire room went silent. All eyes turned to Grandpa in surprise, then shifted toward my father with curiosity and growing tension. But I understood immediately. This was part of Grandpa's plan. He was using the same tactic my father had used on me a month ago, an unexpected bill and a demand to pay it in full. After several seconds of stunned silence, my father set the bill on the table and responded with firm resistance. "I can't pay this. You never discussed this with me beforehand." As soon as he said that, Grandpa fired back with the exact words my father had once used on me. "I raised you, sacrificed for you, and now you're too stingy to spend a few thousand on me." Hearing those familiar words, my throat tightened. Grandpa was deliberately repeating my father's phrases. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a carefully executed lesson. My father lost his composure. He stood up, face flushed with anger, and protested loudly, "I'm not paying this. Why is it only me? Why not Mike's or Morgan's?" Grandpa had fully regained the commanding presence of a military man. He locked eyes with my dad and said, ice cold, "If you don't pay, you're no longer my son." That was when Olivia finally couldn't stay silent. She jumped in, her voice sharp and defensive. "This is ridiculous, Grandpa. Why should my parents pay for your party?" It was as if Grandpa had been waiting for that question all night. Without hesitation, he fired back. "Then why, a month ago, did you make Amelia pay for your father's entire party?" At that moment, a strange sense of satisfaction spread through me. The three of them stood frozen, stunned, and speechless. My parents and Olivia turned their eyes toward me, full of resentment and blame, as if I had betrayed them. My mother finally spoke. "Amelia, what did you say to Grandpa?" Knowing that Grandpa had stood up for me, that he had given them the lesson they deserved, I looked her in the eye and replied calmly, "I just told the truth." That's when Uncle Mike stepped forward in support of Grandpa. With a stern tone, he said, "Dad told me everything. I can't believe you treated Amelia that way." Aunt Morgan chimed in without hesitation. Pay the bill or get out." At that point, there was nothing more they could say. They left the bill on the table, stood up, and began quietly leaving the restaurant, their silence soaked in shame. Before walking out the door, my father turned to me one last time and said bitterly, "Just remember how you embarrassed us tonight." But his words didn't hurt, not anymore. What stung was the realization that he still hadn't learned the lesson. With that, the three left without looking back, leaving a heavy, awkward silence behind. Soon after they were gone, the mood at the party returned to normal. Guests began chatting again as if nothing had happened. Several people offered to chip in for the party, but Grandpa grinned and waved them off. He said playfully, "Keep your money. It's on me. My military pension's still pretty good." The entire room burst into laughter. No one argued with him after that. The party carried on, cheerful and lighthearted. After everything wound down, I waited until the last guest had left. Then I approached Grandpa to thank him. With quiet sincerity, I said, "Thank you, Grandpa, for doing that." He smiled and replied, "Don't mention it. I just stood up for what's right." That night, I slept soundly for the first time in a month, and in the quiet of the night, I silently gave thanks for what life had given me, a grandfather who believed in justice and never stopped protecting the people he loved. I thought Grandpa would stop at the birthday party, but he had a much bigger lesson planned for my parents than I ever imagined. The next morning, while I was still replaying the previous night's events in my mind, Grandpa called. His voice was more serious than usual. He asked the family, Uncle Mike, Aunt Morgan, and me, to come to his house immediately. Something about his tone told me this was important. When we were all gathered at his small home, I noticed a man in a formal suit seated in the living room. It was clear he was a lawyer. The mood in the room shifted. It became formal, almost tense. Then, in front of the lawyer and us, Grandpa made an announcement that stunned me. He declared that he was making a significant change to his will. My parents and Olivia were being removed entirely. Every share of the estate they were once entitled to would now go to me. I froze in shock. I could hardly process what I just heard. After stating his decision, Grandpa instructed the lawyer to update the legal documents immediately. He also asked him to notify my parents of the change formally. At that moment, it became clear that Grandpa had planned this long in advance. Every move had been thought out. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. That afternoon, news of the change in the will reached my parents and Olivia. Their reaction was swift and desperate, far more than I ever expected. They showed up at Grandpa's doorstep, determined to beg for forgiveness and persuade him to reverse his decision. But Grandpa, with the unwavering resolve I'd known since I was a child, didn't budge. He stood inside, watching them through the window, but never opened the door. There wasn't even a flicker of softness in his expression. They ended up kneeling on his front porch for nearly 30 minutes. I could picture it clearly, crying, pleading, saying whatever they thought might work. They admitted their mistakes, promised to change, and begged him not to alter the will. But none of it made a difference. Grandpa didn't open the door. Instead, he coldly called the police, asking them to step in and end the scene. When the officers arrived, my parents and Olivia were forced to leave Grandpa's property, shamed and defeated. But that still wasn't the end. 3 days later, Grandpa's lawyer officially filed for a restraining order. The court approved it, which meant my parents and Olivia were now legally barred from coming near Grandpa under any circumstances until the day he passed. Violating the order would carry serious legal consequences. Grandpa's decisiveness caught me off guard and left me in awe. He hadn't just taught them a lesson. He ensured they could never harass or manipulate him again. He drew a line that would never be crossed. Once everything had settled, during a quiet weekend visit with Grandpa, like so many others before, I found myself unable to hold back a question that had been weighing on my mind. With a mix of curiosity and concern in my voice, I asked, "Do you regret the decision you made?" He didn't answer right away. For almost a full minute, Grandpa sat in silence. Deep in thought, I could see the reflection of years of wisdom in his eyes as he carefully considered every aspect of what I had just asked. Then finally, he looked at me and spoke slowly but with conviction. "I gave them a chance. If at that party they had turned to you and apologized, if they had admitted their mistake, I wouldn't have taken them out of the will." His words hit me like a beam of clarity, lighting up everything I hadn't fully seen before. Grandpa wasn't acting out of coldness or revenge. He wasn't trying to punish them out of spite. He gave them a final chance, one last opportunity to make things right and show genuine remorse. But my parents had chosen their fate. They had every chance right there at the party to acknowledge the hurt they caused and to own their mistakes. Instead, they doubled down on pride, arrogance, and the belief that they were entitled to everything. Grandpa's decision wasn't cruel. It was simply the natural consequence of their choices. 2 years have passed since everything happened. Our family still exists, but with a completely different structure. We still gather for the big occasions, Christmas, birthdays, but now it's just me, Grandpa, Uncle Mike, Aunt Morgan, and their families. The absence of my parents and Olivia has become a quiet fact that we all have accepted. None of us has contacted them in these 2 years. No phone calls, no texts, no form of contact at all. It's as if they were people who once passed through our lives and then disappeared entirely. Sometimes I wonder if they're doing okay or happy, but the thought passes quickly, like a breeze. I'm not sharing this story to ask for pity, and I have no interest in trashing my parents or my sister. The reason I'm telling you this is because I know there are so many others out there who are going through the same thing I did. People are being financially exploited by their families. People are mistreated, viewed as nothing more than an ATM instead of a loved one. Through my story, I want to offer a message. Learn to stand up for yourself. Don't let anyone, even family, take advantage of your kindness or love. Genuine love must come with respect and fairness. If a relationship brings pain and injustice, walking away from it might be the right choice. Thank you for sticking with me through this long story. Before I end, I'd like to hear your thoughts on something. Do you think my grandfather went too far by cutting my parents and sister out of his will? Was it an overreaction, or was it a fair and deserved decision? I genuinely want to hear your perspectives. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if it meant something to you, please consider subscribing, hitting the like button, and sharing the story with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for taking the time to listen.